Okay, this is my 6th time recording this video, so hopefully this one works. Okay, so for my final project, I wanted to focus on the medium teacher control approach. Mostly just because a lot of my beliefs related to that approach. And so this is my front cover. And on here I just have some words and phrases that represent my beliefs and just things that stuck out to me in my philosophy paper. For example, I have consistency with rules and discipline. I think in a classroom, consistency is extremely important, both consistency and structure. So I wrote that on here, and then I wrote find and absorbing meaning on their own. I think it's really important in the classroom as a teacher, especially just to create lesson plans that allow students to generate their own ideas and their own opinions about things. So I think that is the biggest way that they will be able to learn, and that way they're able to absorb that meaning on their own, and it's just more valuable to them. So I think it's important as teachers to create lesson plans that do that. Okay, so on my first page, I have my philosophy page, and like I said, I identify most with the medium teacher control approach, and the teacher that I feel like I related the most with was Kerwin and Mendler. I feel like after researching them, I feel like I agree with all of their points, and they're the ones that emphasize the discipline with dignity phrase. And so I wrote down a few key components of the medium teacher control approach. For example, I talked about how student development with the medium control approach comes from both innate and both outer forces. And that's a big reason why I wanted to do the medium control approach, just because like everything else in life, like eating or exercising or other church matters, balance is really, really important, and we want to find that healthy balance. And so I feel like the medium control approach is the perfect balance between the high teacher control approach, which I feel like I agree with a lot of those concepts, and the low as well. And so I feel like the medium is just a perfect balance of those things. And like I said, when the student's learning in the classroom, it comes from a balance of both that student learning on their own and from the teacher teaching. So I feel like that's kind of like a perfect balance for students to learn. And then I talked a little bit about how the student-centered psychology is super important in the medium teacher control, and teachers will use that as much as possible. However, most of the time the group-centered control or the group-centered learning is most important. Or not most important, but is used the most. And I thought that was really interesting, and I feel like I agree a lot with that concept. And then also the interacting model of discipline. So when students and teachers are jointly coming up, obviously with teacher-guided instruction, are jointly coming up with the rules and the procedures and the consequences in the classroom, I think that is really important to do, because students not only I think it gives students a sense of like responsibility and accountability, but also students feel like they have some type of control, some sense of control over what happens to them. And so maybe sometimes if a student doesn't get their way, maybe because they know that they helped make up those rules and those consequences, they're a lot more likely to take accountability, and they will respond much better. And so I really like that concept. And then down here I shared the teacher and the student roles and responsibilities. And one of the student roles and responsibilities I thought was interesting was that the control of the student behavior is their responsibility, because they're the ones that came up with the rules and they agree to those rules. And I really like that. I just really like that they can be so involved in that aspect of the classroom. Okay, we'll move on. So this is my democratic classroom page. And here is just my foldable, and it has my philosophy statement, the class job, the student voice, the student leadership, all of that. But one thing I wanted to touch on was the class job section. I think that having class jobs in the classroom is super important and gives the student a sense of responsibility and independence. And it feels like their job or whatever they do, it gives the students a sense of purpose, and like what they're doing actually affects the classroom and affects the classroom environment. For example, something as small as turning on and off the lights, if that's their job for the week or whatever, they feel like they're making a difference because they're turning on and off the lights, and that does make a difference in the classroom. And so I think class jobs, I really liked writing that section especially. I thought it was interesting. And so my next idea is the intention, or my next folder is intentions for motivation. And on this folder, I kind of just talked about how do we get our students motivated, and then I talked a little bit about the different types of motivation, so like intrinsic and extrinsic, and then I put some examples at the bottom of that. And how we get our students motivated, obviously we can't force our students to become motivated, but I think as teachers we can provide a variety of different ways of learning or understanding a concept. In one of my classes we have been talking a lot about universal design, so multiple means of representation, expression, and engagement. And I really liked that because not only does every student feel like their learning style is being used and they're learning in the best way, it helps students feel or get more motivated and more engaged and interested and actually like intrigued in what's going on. For example, if we're learning about animals, going on a field trip to the zoo, or maybe instead of like just reading out of a textbook, watching a video clip, just using a variety of different like teaching styles or just a variety of teaching a certain concept, I think can get students motivated. And that's something that I do want to try in my classroom. And then as far as extrinsic behavior and intrinsic behavior, obviously as teachers, I feel like most of us want our students to eventually become intrinsically motivated to do things rather than just focusing on the rewards. And most of the time, students will come into the classroom not intrinsically motivated, and they're kind of just going with the motions and just doing things. They're extrinsically motivated, so they're doing things just to not get in trouble or to get a certain reward or things like that. And I think that the only way to gain intrinsic motivation is to use those extrinsic forces. So maybe as I think that like throughout the year, as students are more comfortable and they're naturally following those rules and going along with those consequences, I think that at some point it has to click, like, oh, maybe I should be following these rules outside of school, like, or maybe these rules are actually like, maybe this is the right thing to do, things like that, or maybe they could use them like in the future or whatever. I think that at some point that needs to click. Okay, and then my next one is the rules and procedures, and I just talked about why we need rules and procedures, and I think that we need them strictly for consistency and structure, just because kids need that. They'll thrive on that. They know what's expected of them. And I'll establish these by posting them around the classroom and bringing them up frequently. And then my next folder is prevention, and on here I just talked about how we build a positive support rapport with students. I think the number one thing is knowing the students knowing that we care about them and we know them and we're using their names and we know about the little things about their lives outside of school and their families or whatever, and providing that consistent structured routine is really important. And I talked about a few procedures like going to the bathroom, raising your hand, morning meetings, turning in homework. And then I have the interventions page, and on here I talked about the mild, moderate, and chronic interventions. At the bottom, I just talked about how bullying will not be tolerated in my classroom at all. And then my last page is the classroom map. And on here, I have created my desks, the student desks, to be in a horseshoe formation. So that way they can always see the board, they can always see me because they're all face toward me, and this way I can always see them, and so I know if they're getting distracted or whatever. And I think that this formation will help them be less distracted because they're always facing the front, and it'll be, yeah, I really like that formation. And I created spaces in the back rows so that the students in the front rows can get into their desks without feeling really cramped, and so it's more of like a spacious, open environment. And then I have that morning meeting rug. The symbol is a heart right in the middle, just because I think that heart symbolizes unity and teamwork. And then I have strategically placed the other elements of my classroom map around. And then I have my philosophy paper and my classroom map paper and other handouts I've received. Thank you.